I think I'll get us all started here. Thank you very much for those that are attending in person and those that are I guess the camera's here. Those that are on Zoom, welcome, and those that are watching the recording afterwards. Thank you for coming. This is the April edition of our Nonprofit Executives Council meeting. Very happy to have Eric Smith, Extension Educator, Community and Economic Development at Central State University Extension, a CESTA Land-Grant Program. And he'll be talking to us today about Community and Engagement Toolkit and how to grow your impact and support for the public that you serve. And I believe with that, I'll just hand it right over to Eric to take us through the rest of the program here today.
All right, wonderful. Again, Eric Smith here. And I imagine if you have questions or comments and you're on the Zoom, I assume Matt is monitoring. And so just drop those in the chat. I imagine is how we can do that.
Yep.
Please, as we go along, this will be very informal. Please, if there's any questions or feedback or thoughts or something strikes your fancy, just dive in. So first of all, just thank you, Matt. Thanks to everyone here for having me. Like Matt said, my name is Eric Smith, and I work with Central State University Extension in the Community and Economic Development Unit. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but let's talk first about what we'll be talking about today. I'm assuming this is probably the first time you've heard about Extension through Central State University. You may know Extension from OSU, so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about Central State and the services we offer. And then I was invited, Matt was, one thing that piqued Matt's interest in the suite of things that we do in community development. Engagement is something that interested him. And so I'll talk a little bit about community engagement as it relates to kind of that bigger picture of what community development is all about. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll have some practical tools that you could potentially go back if you wanted to and use in your own environment. I will send the PowerPoint or leave the PowerPoint with Matt, which I assume will be sent out. Yeah. The links in there are live. You can just click on those and they will take you to the tools we'll talk about today. So you can hopefully go back and if something here seems like it's worthwhile, then you can go back and use that. So as far as the engagement piece, we're going to first talk about kind of a little bit of a piece about, why it's important and what it is. And then we'll go into those tools and some practical examples as well. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A time at the end and some evaluations. So with that, again, I want to kind of just point out where now I can work across Ohio. I started in 2020 with the extension. That's when Central State expanded to the statewide to be to a regional focus, but statewide impact. The area that's in yellow, about 22 counties. That's the region that I have a focus on, although any of us in the community development unit will work statewide, just depending on what the needs are. So in Northwest Ohio, my focus has been 4 things primarily. And so those kind of fall out like this: small business development, okay? And in particular, we're looking at what are the startups category as kind of where we tend to focus. So we've got a curricula I could work someone through at an individual level, or if there's a community that wants to have a cohort of people to come through a basic curriculum to understand basic terms, to really have someone to be a thought partner with them as they refine their idea, test some things out. So we provide that. The second area is working with small scale farmers and providing assistance there. A lot of times that's happening just on individual levels. I go out and I'll do some coaching and that kind of thing. And the focus there, I'm not the technical expert. We'll talk about the team later. I'm not going to be able to help a farmer with how to grow this or that, product. But the business side of farming is where I might come in. Okay, what's your break-even point when you can start out? Those kinds of questions. That's what I'll deal with them. Then we talk about professional development. So some soft skills training that I could come in and provide. you know, if you've got a workforce and you want to train on communication skills and that sort of thing. We've got some curricula, extension curricula around that I could bring in. A lot of the places that have been interested in that so far have really actually been the correctional facilities like Richland Correctional, the Worth Center in Lima. And then finally, we talk about chameleons, and I'll talk more about that in a second. It's within that category is what I'm bringing my engagement information for you today. Just a little bit about a background. You know, I've been at this for about 2 decades at this point, and that has included work in Africa, in international development, which is where I kind of cut my teeth in the community development world, and then sustainable work in Central Appalachia when I was based out of Southeast Ohio, and then of course in various urban environments doing workforce and community development, places like Springfield, Dayton, and now heavy emphasis in Richland or Mansfield and Toledo's user services, Lima. So those kinds of environments as well. So a little bit about Central State University and our experience with extension. Now, when I say extension, does that ring a bell with folks? I mean, do you feel like that's something you're familiar with? Okay. So you're probably, if you're not, you probably do know what 4-H is. And that is an extension program. OSU does an excellent job with that. But also within extension, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but for us, extension falls as a program of our College of Engineering, Science and Technology and Agriculture. So we do have a STEM ag focus within the CESTA College. And so we have, well, I should say Central State, I should back up, Central State really founded or became a separate entity, publicly supported entity, historically Black college, university now, but in 1884. And so since that time, we've been really focused on these kinds of concrete things, tools that and a curricula that students can take and create a good life and impact Ohio. But we have within the CESTA College, we have 3 main components. One is the research that happens with, you know, water, agriculture, different type of agriculture, production, those kinds of things. Then of course there's the academics, classes we provide. It's a campus has about 2,000 students. And then there's extension. And the purpose of extension is to take what what's being researched and taught at the university level, but making sure that communities have access to all the resources and information that we're learning at campus. And so that's my role, is to be available and present in communities all across Northwest Ohio. So historically, the Cooperative Extension Service has 4 main components. I'm in the Community Economic Development Unit. So I serve Northwest Ohio. That's my position as an educator within CED. We also have on our team a 4-H youth development educator, an ag and natural resources educator, and a family consumer sciences educator, and then a regional associate that coordinates all the work. You know, I'll make sure that Matt has an electronic version of the stuff I shared, but those of you that are here in person, you can see on the flyer, you can see all 4 different units and the services that we can provide in those different units. So as I come here today, like I said, I'm really coming with a focus on that 4th category that I focus on, which is community resilience. Okay, and so there's different things I could do to support your efforts here in Marion City, Marion County. So at an organizational level, if you just want like maybe a one-off workshop, I just did one in Lima for an organization there a few weeks ago. It was just an action planning workshop. They just wanted to have an outside facility to come in, and these are all free of service. these are free services to you, but they just wanted to some discussion with their leadership about, you know, the coming year. And so we just worked through that. So I've got, you know, I'm certified in different facilitation techniques. And so I just brought that and we talked through some things. There could be a multi-party initiative. I don't know, there's collaborative around, you know, the food policy or something like that, or whatever it is. We can bring technologies, social technologies like collective impact and help you structure things going forward. Appreciative inquiry, etc. Or at the community level, within extension, there's you know, technologies like community profiles, where we can bring the community together, and the community can brainstorm priorities for the coming year, and we can set up committees to start to move those things forward. Or the community heart and soul, which is more of a 2-year process timeline that you'll work through as a community. So anything in between, we can provide services around that. Okay, so with that overview, any questions about Central State, about extension, or about anything that I've said so far?
So how do you relate to the Ohio State University extension? We have an extension office here in Marion, and Whitney Gurman is, you know, does, it sounds like a lot of similar things. So how do you guys relate to each other? How do you cross over? What's that relationship?
Oh yeah, so the question was, what does our relationship look like with OSU extension? The major difference, I think, maybe this is true, but not difference, but like a lot of my work will be with the very small scale farmers or the small scale entrepreneurs that they may not that the traditional programs don't necessarily reach to, but then we do have overlap as well. So like in Richland County, for example, we're working with the same set of urban farmers. They are providing, you know, we're just complementing each other in that work. So there's overlap where that seems appropriate. And then in some cases, if they aren't touching a certain population, we'll go there. So 4-H is an example, right? Urban 4-H isn't a big part of the I mean, it could be, I'm sure, but not a big part of the OSU's portfolio. So we're not going to touch, you know, the county level work is so phenomenal. But if there are some schools in an urban context that aren't using 4-H but would like to, well, we got someone on staff that can do that. So does that?
So do you, I mean, this is just getting into the weeds, it doesn't matter. So like, how many entities, how many land grant institutions in Ohio extension offices? Just the two of you, just Ohio State University and Central State? Are you the only two?
Yeah, we're the only two.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're an 1890 land grant. So what the history is, the extension as a model came out, of course, in 1863, the Morrill Act, and we're still an agricultural environment, agricultural nation at the time. And so higher education was really geared toward, you know, your classical, you know, curricula. And so, you know, your farmer wasn't benefiting from the system. And so this was an effort to make sure that our universities were being responsive to communities and to the agricultural needs of communities in particular. And of course, it's expanded since then as to what we provide. But that.
We're talking to Eric earlier when you mentioned the Mansfield association that's kind of spearheading the microfarm project there. Sounds like that organization is being served by both OSU Extension Office and your Extension Office for different projects that both kind of developing utilized. That association is utilizing both services for different things.
Yeah. I had no idea that there was another land grant institute.
Yeah. So the history was, and I should say, so the history is that then in 1890, after the original Morrill Act, the second one was passed in 1890, the government had realized, Congress had realized that the main universities were not serving the,
Well,
the entire
time,
population.
the amount of agriculture that was out there, probably prohibited from one university.
So in 1890, some historically Black colleges and universities were brought into the system, and then actually in 1994, Native American universities were also brought into the system. So a state like Ohio has two for that reason. And actually, we only, even though it was 1890 was the act, it was 2014 when Central State became a land-grant university. And so that's what we, yeah. And then, yeah. So that's a little bit of the history of it.
So this is still relatively new.
We are.
That's maybe why we haven't. It hasn't saturated area. Why it's still considered like a. Oh, I haven't heard of it yet because technically you're just now getting into that game.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yes, for sure.
Good question.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So community engagement. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I'll be well. I'm going to weave some tools in with my discussion, and also be weaving in a lot of some experience. I'll kind of dwell a little bit on some work, a project I did in Springfield, Ohio, with a neighborhood there. So I'll be weaving those two things together today. So first of all, community engagement. What is it, right? I guess maybe what I'd like to do is, if anybody would be willing to share, when's a time when you felt like you belonged, like you were part of a community? And it might have been a neighborhood experience growing up. It might have been a work environment that provided that for you. Would anybody care to share an experience where you felt home, you felt belonging, you felt a sense of community? Let's start there, and then we'll move into a discussion of how you make that happen, right?
Mine would have been just growing up 4-H. We still see the same folks. Now our kids and our grandkids are going through it. Whether you were going to 4-H camp or just being at the county fair, the actual meetings, that's definitely mine.
Great.
Yeah.
I had different times, but one that jumped to mind is when I was in college, I was a member of the Catholic Newman Center, which is just the name of the Catholic churches on college campuses. And we had a Newman Club, and the president of the club got an apartment in the Newman Center. So like I needed a place to live. So then I, worked my way up to be club president, but that grew. And because I lived there too, when people would come in to study or just different activities, part of my job was to open the building and, be security, and that it really built a community for me around that college experience. Living there helped.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Has anybody from online raised a hand?
Anyone online, feel free to pop in.
It's Hannah. I can add something. In college as well, I was a part of a business fraternity. And, when you start in college, you don't really know anybody. It's kind of overwhelming to walk in these buildings and go to your classes at times. So when I joined this business fraternity, I was able to, walk in the College of Business and go up to the hub, which was kind of a study social area, and know just about everyone in there. So it felt like a very welcoming experience as a freshman in college, which was really important for me.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, Hannah. Anyone else?
I'll throw one in there. I think at the start of the pandemic, I felt definitely a sense of the community coming together to provide resources for our businesses and our restaurants, and that was just a really cool moment, I guess, to all the relationships that we as a chamber have been building up, kind of like leading to that moment of like, all right, so now we're in this position to do all the good that we can do. Let's, I guess, make sure we're maximizing what we are in the community. And it wasn't like someone was telling us to do this, just it felt like the way to move us as a community forward. And it's cool to see that so many other organizations that we all service organizations coming together and just saying like, how in these sectors, how can we help get us through this? That was really kind of impactful for me to know, all right, this is what Marion can do and Marion can be, in Ohio can be, to me personally too. Before that, definitely I felt it, but I felt like this is my home, I guess, definitely through that, this whole process too, for sure.
Yeah, again, thanks for sharing, everyone. So this is great, right? So we've experienced community in various aspects. And when we talk about community and community engagement, it can be anything, right? It can be geography, it can be common interests, like 4-H could be the tie, right? We heard tonight college experience, right? So community can be any and all of those. I will be later asking you to think about, and you can be thinking about it now, but your organization, what is your community, right? And we'll be focusing on that some. So be thinking about that as we go through this, but your organization probably has either it's a membership or it's constituency or whatever you call it, consumers or whatever that is for you. It's the staff, right? It's all those things. So be thinking about that as we go through this, okay? So engagement is a key piece of building a sense of community because you can engineer the kind of experiences that you had, right? That can be created. And in fact, I would argue it needs to be created, okay? So let's talk about engagement. We'll use this as our definition. Community engagement is a planned process with a specific purpose of working with identified groups. And again, that could be a common interest, a common geography, what you name that. Specific groups of people to address issues affecting their well-being, okay? And so I think some key things to me in that definition of the reason why I like it, it's a planned process. There's intention to this. And if we're going to do an engagement to produce the kind of experience that you had for others, then there needs to be intention behind it. It needs to be ongoing and sustained, and it needs to be done in conjunction with the people that are your community, okay? Whatever that is, that how you define the community, okay? But it has to be done with them because ultimately it's about them and their well-being, how they define it. And so engagement's about moving with them into that, okay? That definition, again, comes from a book. Well, there's a series, and I'll introduce that series. The first book has that definition that I like. So I'll introduce you to the series in a little bit. Why is this important? I'd like to introduce you. We'll just take a few minutes. We're going to hear from Andrea Carter. Andrea is one person that's really taught me about the importance of the idea of with, right? So why do we design what we do with community in mind, and specifically with the people who are that we're here to serve or that are part of our community in that way? Why is that so critical? We're going to hear as she talks. This is one has lived experience of poverty, lived experience with correctional environment, and with addiction. But she's going to talk about this is kind of a tale of not two cities, but two clinics. And we're going to hear the difference in her experience between a community or a clinic that engages and one that does not. So do you mind explaining that?
Hi, my name is Andrea, and I'm here to say that you can make a huge difference in someone's life by pursuing holistic solutions. I know that this is the case because I've experienced it. I've been clean for a really long time now, But I remember when I first got out of being locked up, I was assigned to an addiction clinic. The supervising doctor saw me once every 3 months. He clearly didn't have any idea who I really was. There was no relationship built with him whatsoever. He didn't take into consideration my history and what kind of patient I was. And the office didn't take into consideration that I was working an hourly wage job and that taking a half day off every other Tuesday to sit for hours in a waiting room was just way too difficult for me. But really, these are the experiences day in and day out when you're in these type of situations. You start to get used to it. With certain agencies, you leave message after message with no one ever calling you back. You really start to feel like a number. And that's it. The only way to get a response from a human being is to threaten a state hearing. It just burns me up thinking about it. Can you imagine a wealthy person putting up with this type of treatment? Eventually, I found my way to a health clinic in my hometown that was completely different. I remember going there for the first time for my addiction treatment and finding out I could also get my primary care physician there. Plus, my mental health medications could be prescribed and I could attend counseling there too. All of these services were under the same roof, connected by just one visit. All of the different staff working with me communicated with each other. Everyone knew what everyone else was doing for me, and they really looked at me as a whole person, not just like a number. They even provided telehealth as an option, which was super convenient to do over my lunch breaks at work. If you're homeless or have other issues, a patient advocate connects you to resources in your very own community. They have a sliding fee scale and work with you even if you don't have insurance. You can pay what you can, and they don't ever turn you over to collections. It's very clear that they have designed the program with their patients at the very center. They understand the holistic nature of poverty and the importance of being able to address the person as a whole. Places like this, they're a breath of fresh air. When you're treated with respect, like you have value, it does wonders for your self-esteem. It does wonders for your own leadership abilities. It does wonders for your ability to follow your dreams and to find something as simple as hope. All of which catapults you forward in leaps and bounds. My hope is that more organizations will design their programs and culture with the person they are serving at the very center. Can you streamline your processes, make it user-friendly, work around schedules, and address everything that is needed in just one spot? I think a good first step is for organizations to hire or to invite onto their board or leadership team, or in some other way intentionally listen to people with lived experience with things like addiction, poverty, the correction system, etc. In my case, where I work today, I was not hired in spite of my background, but because of it. They said, "Oh my gosh, we need Andrea because she can speak into what we're trying to do to change people's lives." These are the kind of steps that we can take in pursuing holistic solutions.
Yeah, so Andrea is part of a leadership alliance for Ohio. It's backed by a group called Think Tank that I used to work with. So the leadership alliance is really about people's lived experiences, being invited in and working with, helping organizations become designed around and engage the folks they're serving. But anyways, if we could go around the room and just, was there a phrase, a statement, a comment, anything like that? You don't have to dig into it, but just what's a phrase or a statement or a comment or a word that kind of struck you from that presentation? Who would be willing to start us off? Okay, thank you.
I think with her saying that she was listened to, she was heard, she was treated with respect. You know, it's tough to have to ask for help. And then when you're looked down upon when you do, you don't want to go back.
Thank you.
I like the part where she stated that she wasn't hired in spite of her background, but because of her background. So, we try to focus on that sometimes, so I love hearing it from another source.
Thank you.
For me, I mean, I think she said this right away, and then I wrote it down, you know, that plans are made with the people that are impacted. I think too often, and I know we're guilty of it sometimes too, that we do it for people instead of with people.
Thank you.
I'm a huge fan of having our members tell us what they're looking for. We don't work if we're not working for them. We can't tell them what they want. We want to hear and be an ear and be a response to what they're looking for. Also trying to make sure we're ahead of, you know, trying to have out where we think we can assist, but also we have to always be constantly trying to engage with our members to ask and get where they are and ask them what they're trying to look for. So like that.
Anyone from online?
I think what I heard was the portion of in the beginning was just the frustration of being able to coordinate and work, and you know, the things that just didn't work out. She couldn't do them all at one time. So
Good point.
And making sure that programs and services that we offer in the community are person focused and person centered, and tailored to the individuals that we serve.
Thank you.
I think someone said this already, but the fact that she was hired because of her background and her experience and it wasn't used against her, that was really, really what got me.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate that. So I guess for me, when I think about her story, Andrea's story, and I think about the work that I've done, why engagement? Why does it matter? It's a way, if we go back to the definition, it's working with the community, whatever that is for you, right? It's designing the program with, around, that person is at the center of the story, right? The center of the program. Why does it matter? Well, a couple reasons I would point out. I can tell you that, first of all, Andrea, I mean, the progress that she could make was vastly different, right? Between the two scenarios, the two clinics that she worked with. So if you want to have impact and you're not doing engagement, you're probably not having the level of impact that you could if you really were designing this in conjunction with those involved. The second thing I would say is, don't you think she's one heck of a champion for that clinic? So also you get some bonus points, if you will, when you do engagement well and you're building community as well as providing the service. When you do all that together, you get some champions out of this, and that will help you with all the, I mean, I know I've been in the nonprofit world most of my career. I know the money and all those issues. Boy, to have an Andrea championing you is going to make a difference in your brand, which helps you with all the other stuff that you feel like you need to do as far as the money and those different things. Okay, so that's why, those are a couple of reasons why I feel the engagement piece is so important. Okay. So just to lay a little bit of context, so community engagement, there's a lot of threads that come into this. I want to point out one thing or a couple things here real quick. There was in 1969, Sherry Arnstein wrote a paper that was one of those seminal works that's had ripples to today. And she was describing the ladder of citizen participation and how, depending on the kind of participation, affected how people felt legitimate the government was, the government entity, you know, or the organization was, the legitimacy, their willingness to work with the agency, really made it was what made it differentiated was the different levels of engagement. So, you know, sometimes we can see engagement is used as manipulation to get, you know, to prove a point for you so that you can get what you need. But that's not therapy in a clinical sense, but those are non-participation experiences. And then you have different degrees of tokenism is the way she talked about it, right? Placation, consultation, informing. Those are useful, informing and those kind of things are useful. But sometimes what happens is we extract that knowledge and then we go use it to apply for grants or whatever. And the population we're working with and getting the information from and all that, they don't actually benefit, right? So that's why she's talking about tokenism. But then you have citizen power, and that's where they, you know, people, citizens were engaged in a way that they could actually control the outcome or shape the outcome in a very real way. So that had different degrees of citizen power. Okay, so that's how she was framing it. Okay, so from that, then, you know, over the years, the International Association of Public Participation, you know, kind of refined and strengthened the model, strengthened some of that language. And so you can think about it as kind of a continuum. Engagement happens on the one side, and again, each of these have a value and they have a place, and you want to be thinking about what's appropriate for your context, right? But that continuum goes from information, which is where you're just sharing, you know, this is the program that's coming up, right? You post a flyer on your Facebook page or whatever. So there's information sharing all the way to, on the far end, empowerment. Okay, and that's where people are in fact engaging in actually shaping, you know, the service, shaping what it is, or helping you decide what the services need to be, and then shaping what the services are like. So those are all things that can happen at the other end of the spectrum. Okay. Is this making sense? Is this kind of resonating? You can imagine, by and large, we tend to focus on, you know, inform, consult, but some groups will do some involvement. It starts to get to be a stretch for us a lot of times to get to collaboration, and certainly often a stretch for empowerment. Again, depending on the context. So that model developed by the International Association of Participation, Public Participation, has permeated through different places. One place that I think has done a really good job of bringing all of that information together is the Department of Environment, Land and Water for Victoria State in Australia. That link will be live when it comes to you, and so you can go and you can see the different booklets. But the one that I want to point out for now is I would definitely, if nothing else, use the third book, okay, the Engagement Toolkit, okay, the one on the right. And you'll have a link specifically to that one as well, so you can download that as a PDF. And the cool thing about it is it gives a taxonomy of all the different kinds of engagement strategies people have used. Everything from a more in-depth thing like a full-on workshop, or say citizen juries, to some of the less, some of those that are more on the information side of things, like, you know, sharing on media, etc. But it has over, you know, I think 70 plus strategies, and each one has its own page that describes it and how to use it. Okay, so I just want you to know that that's available to you. And so if you ever need to think about, you know, that would be interesting to do something around here, do more engagement. Now you've got a toolkit that has pretty much everything that you could possibly think of, okay, to draw on. So at this stage, I'm just going to share a few examples. And again, I'm going to weave in some of my experience in Springfield just as a way to make this concrete and real, okay? I won't have time to do 70 stories, but we'll do a few. Okay, so the initiative I was supporting was thinking about how, this was a historically underinvested neighborhood. This was a neighborhood context. And we were wondering, how do you create an environment that's where kids succeed, right? Youth succeed. And so the elementary school often had these festivals. This was a back to school festival. So what can we do for engagement? That in and of itself, of course, is engagement, but one simple tool you can do in a situation like this, we would often put up a kind of a sign, or you could use a chalkboard, you could do whatever it is, but have something there, and then you have a question at the top, okay? This neighborhood will be a great place for our kids when ... And then people can come and they can write stuff on that board, okay? So that's a simple way. We'll call in the business, we'll talk about thin data, right? So that's a simple, easy, quick way to get some general sense of where people are at in terms of what priorities might be or something like that, okay? Little bit heavier engagement at this stage. We will do the neighborhood did a spaghetti dinner once a year. The association will put on the spaghetti dinner. So we added having community folks come in as listening partners to sit at the table. They would be there to document the conversation. There'd be some guidance from the front saying, okay, we're going to talk about what's, and again, there'll be a question, right? Okay, this will be a great neighborhood when, okay, or something like that. There'll be dialogue. Somebody will be there to take notes, and that all those notes will be tabulated and looked at and whatever by the association, and help guide what they would do in the next year. Okay, so that was something additional that we added to the dinner. So we got some data out of it that we could then use for strategy. And then even a step farther, we used the study circle model, and we actually, the local foundation actually supported us with this. We took and trained in a day-long training residents to become facilitators, and they were then expected then to get their neighbors, gather their neighbors, and they would walk them through a multi-week discussion, a dialogue, guided dialogue, and then we would all of us would then come back together. We'd post up on these flip charts what came out of the conversation around what people cared about, when this would be a good place for kids, and then we could do some vote ranking and those kinds of things to sift through. And the neighborhood came up with 10 statements that they wanted to focus on over the course of the project, and then in the following years we started to narrow that down and make a difference. So and these folks got a couple $100 for doing that work as a way of valuing the effort they're putting into it. And so that was that's another kind of example of again, now we're moving into that deeper level of engagement where they're actually deciding in their neighborhood what made sense as far as the next steps. And
so I was going to ask about a stipend, so it sounds like you did pay them a little bit. How many of them followed through and had those conversations with their neighbors and came back with data?
yeah, so I think 12 went through the training, and then 10 met the criteria of an average of 10 people recruited to go through a multi. I think we did 4 weeks.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Percent of not dropping off.
Yeah. My favorite story was, so Dave, who went through this, he actually went and got business cards with, because we call them public dialogue facilitators. Because as a base curricula, we were using something dialogue to change curricula, but so he actually went and got business card created with public dialogue facilitator on it, because he was just so proud that he participated in that environment. Yeah. So there's all different ways you can do different, those tools that'll be in that toolkit that you can pull out and use to engage, get the data, to get people to come together and think with you about what needs to happen. And I'm going to throw one more tool at you. This is where I think we're going to try to make this feel concrete for you. There's a group out of New York called Building Movement, and I like one of their booklets. And so again, the link is live. This would be something you could actually take and just, if you come away from today and you're like, man, we should probably do more engagement. You can take this booklet. It has a couple of case studies of organizations that have made, it's called the 5% shift, right? So it's not, you're not going to, the bandwidth isn't there for any of us to shift everything overnight, right? 5% shift is your goal for the next year or 2 years, okay? But then if you make another 5% after that, another 5, it'll compound, right? So they have a couple case studies of organizations that have gone through a 5% shift and how they've made a change things up a little bit to be more deeply engaging. And then they have already laid out the examples of a workshop you could do then, where you pull those constituents or you pull your representatives from your community together, actually go through a facilitated workshop, and it's all laid out so you can pull it off the shelf and do it. Okay. What I like about this is they're using really good research in the community development field, research by Townley and Cluse. What they describe is in their research is the four components that make us, four of the key components to make something feel like a sense of community are these: membership, okay? Do you feel that sense of belonging to that group, right? A sense of identification with that, right? Do you have influence, okay? And are you able to influence the community? Is the community influencing you, right? There's some reciprocity there. Fulfillment, okay, this is both physical needs of getting met, but also those psychological needs. And then connection, do you feel that positive effect of membership in the community, right? So do you feel like you're getting something out of it? So I'm going to leave us with some questions around those. And I guess the key is if we can get to where our answer is yes on these, right? Then our community, whatever that is, membership if we're the Y, it's our constituency, our member businesses, whatever that is for you, right? The people that you serve. If you can get to where they are experiencing these, then that creates kind of an engine, right, for change, for transformation that you wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, so I like the concept that Edgar Kahn, who's he's recently passed, but he's kind of a leader in citizen juries and those kinds of things. Some of the more in-depth pieces of this. He says the way a community runs is like it's like a hybrid vehicle. What you need is that thin stream of fuel that turns the engine, creates the motion, but that motion then exponentially is the thing that moves the car forward, right? There's that he calls it the psychic energy that you get out of a sense of community, a sense of connection, a sense of identity and belonging that can move you farther than you could just throwing money at an issue, right? You can't just create transformation with money. It's got to be both of those. The fuel helps to get things started, but it's that psychic energy that really uplifts and creates transformation. And so I just want to encourage you. The reason we do engagement is to get to that point. Transformation happens when that sense of community is there, because that propels us to make the changes that we need to have happen. So again, those questions you might want to think about when you go back home. Who makes up our community? Do they see their participation in our programs? Is their participation, do they see it positively? Does your community have influence over what programs you offer and how they're delivered? Are your programs structured for belonging and for connection, and meeting those everyday needs that you're focused on? Are people's successes celebrated? How are they asked to support others in the community as well, right? So those are just a few questions you want to go back and be thinking about. And I was going to tell one more story, but we're out of time. The thing I will close with is, I think one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Meg Wheatley. She's an author. She's the founder of the Bracana Institute. And she says this: whatever the problem, community is the answer. All right, whatever the problem, community is the solution. And she even goes on to say things like, the greatest power for change is a community discovering what it cares about, right? So I think that if we use community engagement, the tools well, it produces that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that sense of agency, that I have power of the future. And that's what will propel us toward transformation, not just service delivery or whatever it is, but propel us toward actually transforming the dynamics. So I'll go ahead and close, and if you have thoughts, questions, feedback, and then while I'm doing that, those of you that are here in person, and I'll also attach this to the email, if you're willing to give us a little bit of feedback on to date, that'd be great. So we're an education institution, so we're always trying to improve what we do, you know. So yeah, I'll just wrap up there. Any feedback, thoughts, reflections, anything at all?
Now, a question for you, I guess, or I mean, not more, it is definitely you. So I've been in Marion for 14 years, and we've had on and off community engagement efforts, if you will. A lot of times the chamber was leading those. Probably the most recent one was, there was a big grant request. I don't know if you were here as Vice President yet. Yeah. So we kind of pulled out. And so where are we with those kind of bigger picture community conversations? I know the United Way talks about impact and they're doing some work with that. So
Great question, Teresa. So at my annual meeting that happened in February, one of the things I announced is that we're working with the original facilitators of OSU Extension Office.
right. Yeah.
Bill
Yay.
Brockmeyer and Myra Moss.
Yeah, I was gonna say Myra. Yeah.
So they did the Envision the 21st Century document in 2000 and 2013. And United Way and I partnered together to bring them back to the community to do a look back at what Marion has accomplished in the last almost 10 years, and to produce one document that will kind of highlight all of the amazing things that Marion has accomplished, and also to identify where there's still some gaps, I guess, and where we can go next. What happens after that document has been created, and again, they're doing this at no cost to the mileage they've asked for, which is an incredible gift to the community that they're doing that. We thank them every chance we get. They're halfway through the interviews that they have to conduct, and we think that document will be out. I'm going to say end of June is what we're shooting for, and at that point, we're hoping that every organization can share that with their folks and their community, and highlight that. We'll do some video, we'll do some, even talking tours or whatever we can do to help, I guess, share the message of what Marion has accomplished and where there's still some things to do, what challenges. And then what happens after that, we'll see. But there could be potential for another community-wide action strategic plan process to go through, and we would certainly be there to help move that forward. Beyond that, I just love all the child care lines and other smaller or more specific targeted alliances and collaborations that are happening. I think more than I can think of in the 12 years I've been in this community, there's just been some really neat, very focused alliances and coalitions that have formed in the last little bit that really, I think, help target specific parts of community. We want to be there to support and be part of all of them. So there's a way to do a global, full community-wide, and but then there's also some great ways to target specific areas of need as well. So a good question, sort of leading.
Well,
Because
I
that's-
should have come to the annual meeting, then I would
You
have
know
answered,
that.
but then I wouldn't have asked the question here, so.
That's true.
I will hear that though, as someone who both personally and then, with my work at the Y participated in several of those workshops and conversations and developing of those plans, it's nice to hear that
Yes.
we're circling back.
And those envisioning documents are actually read every single year during our leadership class. They still influence everything that our leadership class does every year. They always try to choose a project that would have benefited that 2013. By the way, that 2013 envisioning document is still available on our website under the About Marion link. And then our actual annual meeting presentation is fully available on our YouTube channel as well to watch if you want to hear me blabber on for 40 minutes about everything that we're doing and have done last year, what we'll be working on this year. Good question. Any other?
Sorry. Every couple of years, we have to do a community needs assessment for our, the grants that we have and what we can do in our community to make things better. And everything always focuses around drug abuse, drug addiction. I think people get stuck on that they don't want to think outside of, so many wonderful things have happened downtown. Marion, that somebody had that vision. I mean, one of them was standing right there, but it's just
Standing there.
Luke.
Oh, I was gonna say, I didn't know.
Yeah, but I don't think people they want to blame everything on the drugs that they can't see outside of what else can we do? What else can we change? How else can we make things better? It's always drugs, 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 drugs. I mean, one of my sons is a police officer in town, and so I hear that side of the piece. But I mean, I've been in town for 54 years, and the change is remarkable, and the really good things that are happening is remarkable. And I just think people can't think outside of drug.
And that's why yes, 100%. That's why we felt this document helped us give a different tale to tell about, oh my gosh, look at all the incredible things just in the last 10 years that Marion has been able to accomplish the downtown and so many other parts of the community. Doesn't mean that we've solved everything, but I feel like we beat ourselves up so much that we just need to take a breath to look and see in one place all the amazing stuff that we have actually done together in the last 10 years. So to your point, exactly.
Some communities ambassador program out of it, right? So yeah, how do you create opportunities to come learn and learn how to talk about the community differently?
Yep.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from our Zoomers? Well, if there isn't any other comments or questions, then I wanted to thank Eric again for coming to present. And we will again share this video. We'll share the slides, the links that everything that Eric mentioned will be in an email that will go out to all of y'all to take a look at afterwards. Our next meeting would be 2 months from now, and the next first Friday. And until then, we're going to have a great weekend, and thank you again to Eric. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.